Too many knobs. I feel like the guys on Apollo 13. Welcome back to the afternoon constitutional, and I just got tired of listening to our theme song, compensating for something. We are here with another presidential candidate. He is seeking the Libertarian Party nomination for president, Mike Termott. Mike, good to see you, sir. Thanks for coming by.
Great to be with you this morning. Thanks for your time. It's a joy to be on your program.
Well, you say that now. What are we doing? So let me ask you this, and your flyer, your campaign literature calls you the most credible president. We saw Afro Man arrive yesterday, and he regaled everyone with his misunderstood song. I don't know if all the stoners realize he's actually making fun of them in his "'Cause I Got High" rap.
I appreciate that. There is a certain mishap adventure about the lyrics of the song. But my wife is a big fan of Afro Man, so I need to be as supportive as I possibly can.
So when the debates come, there won't be any real attacks between you two?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And I do respect his choice of outerwear.
Well,
and so I'm a big Afro Man supporter.
So let me ask you this. What is it that made you seek the Libertarian Party nomination for president rather than one of the legacy parties that fancy themselves the fourth and fifth branch of our government?
Sure, and they do, don't they? Of course, that's the first problem, is that we need to nip that in the bud. I've been a registered libertarian since about 2010 when I switched.
Is that with the FBI? No, I'm sorry.
When I switched careers from being a professional economist, I went into the police academy around that time. I've been a registered libertarian, so for the last 13 years or so.
Pardon the New York City parlance, how long have you been on the job?
I retired from police work about 18 months ago. I was on the road for 11 and a half years in Broward County, Florida.
Wow. So you went to one of the quiet places.
One of the quiet places. It was a good place for police work if you were interested in being busy.
Yes, it sounds like it. So what does a libertarian's view of where we stand with our confidence in law enforcement and what law enforcement needs to do better and what we as citizens need to understand better about law enforcement justice? Because I feel like there's a real problem in a country where we're looking for police officers to either be security guards or be social workers rather than people gathering evidence so I can I can get justice. Right before we left Memphis, there was a story on the news that morning, Saturday morning, a woman was carjacked at 3 o'clock in the afternoon in one of the neighborhoods.
I understand it's increasingly prevalent around here, yeah.
And it was a young African-American woman, young black woman, and she's just livid because it was her car and all her stuff was in it. And this was the story I said when we started to get the progressive prosecutors, was that this is going to harm the poor person.
Yeah.
So somebody steals some rich guy's Lexus. No offense if you have a Lexus.
Yeah.
No offense to the Lexus dealers that might
and no one is
sponsor
stealing my old beat-up Chevy Silverado either. So I need to be more sensitive to the Lexus owner. But go ahead.
But the paycheck to paycheck single mom can't afford to have her car stolen because she doesn't have the insurance to just send her a replacement. And she needs a justice system that's going to go find the SOB that did it and hopefully bring it back to her. So what do we need to do?
You're exactly right. There are a couple of things that we need to do. Criminal justice reform in the United States is something that I spend a lot of time talking about because I think it is a huge problem. And I would disentangle it into two different buckets. One is how we manage police officers. Having been a police officer myself and having been an economist for a couple of decades before that, I'm a big proponent of holding police more accountable, implementing more transparency in how we go about managing police. But importantly, imposing market forces on the industry. We want it to behave and to operate and to work as efficiently as other industries. And so I think that that means that we need greater competition among the agencies. Where I worked, for example, the city only had two choices. They had the police department that I worked for, or they could fire us all and hire the sheriff's office. So there's a little bit of competition, but not much. We need greater competition. And the reason that we need that is so that we can get leadership of these agencies more in line with community values, what the community wants to focus on.
So would you talk about, instead of one massive, let's say countywide, but I know they use the phrase community policing, and I remind people that that was what the guys in the white sheets were doing, community policing. but more regional than just countywide or citywide.
I'm a big believer in police departments being as small as efficiently possible. The department that I worked for example, was about 100 officers. To get any smaller than that is cost-wise very expensive. It's not quite as efficient. But there's no reason that you can't get smaller than a county in the vast majority of places and institute greater competition. The other thing that you want is greater competition among officers themselves. And I think that public sector unions have been a real problem, a real challenge in this regard. By the way, this is one of the big problems in teachers' businesses also. The teachers' unions preclude competition among teachers. What you want is for the
to the detriment of the teacher.
To the detriment of the teachers.
That's the
which
irony
is one
of
of the
it,
things that is so ironic about it. I'm glad that you brought that up. And one of the reasons why I'm optimistic that at least in the long run, officers and teachers will come around to the idea that the best need to be paid more, the mediocre need to be paid less, and the worst need to be fired. And if we would have an ability to evaluate police officers and teachers on performance, have leadership align better with community values, what it is that the town, the city, the county wants to be focused on, we would have an agency and a set of officers that are more responsive to what local leadership is interested in. This would be easy if we could just say, well, we need our local politicians to work harder at imposing the community's values on the agencies.
But here's a point I make, and this is controversial because a lot of people think it involves growing government. I actually think it shrinks government. But the population of the United States is minimally 3 times larger than it was when we capped the size of the U.S. House of Representatives.
That's right.
Many state houses have capped their sizes for almost the same amount of time. Virginia's, for example, where we are, that General Assembly has not changed size in 100 years, and the population has almost quadrupled.
That's right.
So when you talk about these smaller, more localized police departments, I think that follows that smaller, more localized representation. So when you make these districts smaller, you can also then shrink in the justice systems and the things that work within
You're
them.
100% right. You don't need to have police agencies. New York City has over 40,000 officers. That's obviously an exaggerated example.
But we have precincts. I was in the 111th precinct where I grew up. We have a few. So they have.
But you need it to be as locally controlled as possible.
Right.
To your point, to create greater competition, as well as to create the idea that it should be responsive to what the local interests are, what the local leadership is, and you want to be able to learn one district from another, what's working, what's not. Hey. That agency is doing a good job at X, Y, and Z. This is a problem we have in our community. Let's dump our agency and hire their agency to police our district. This is the kind of thing that you would expect in any other business in America, but for some reason we don't have it in policing.
I'm going to throw a monkey wrench at that because we do that with some of our military contracting now, and we've seen problems with that.
Yeah.
And so how do you regulate, let's say, a private security company rather than a police department? How do you make sure that they're following the Constitution and that they're doing the things the way they're supposed to? How do you regulate that?
First of all, it's not easy. I have been accused in the past of making statements that make it seem like I think that this is, that there's a couple of silver bullets and all gets fixed. It is a long-term challenge. It is a cultural challenge. We need to change the culture of policing as well as the culture of how police and communities interact. So it is a long-term problem. But to your point, there are certain things that we can do to accelerate that process. One, for example, is to get rid of the federal doctrine of qualified immunity. It doesn't affect that many cases, but officers believe that it does, communities believe that it does, and there's this ethos in the police culture that they are not held accountable as they should be. We need for courts to do their job, hold officers accountable, hold agencies accountable. The idea that a citizen who feels like he or she has been wronged, whether they're correct or incorrect, cannot seek redress in court, I find fundamentally un-American. We need for courts to be able to do a better job of holding agencies and officers accountable, I believe.
Mike Dermott is a Libertarian candidate, or candidate for the Libertarian Party nomination for President of the United States. And just stop right now. I hear, but the point is, these are people with ideas, and I want to hear them because I'm tired of, well, we're for the military, and we're for the poor. At some point, they're not. So I want to hear the ideas that are out there, partially because the stereotype isn't law enforcement economics professor. The stereotype of a libertarian is an anarchist. We don't believe in police, we don't believe in laws, we don't believe in culture, we don't believe, that's the stereotype a lot of people have.
Sure, I appreciate that. And the truth of the matter is that we don't believe in the way that certain things are going, and we feel like they need to be fixed.
That's not a problem. I mean, that's the programming philosophy of the show. I'm just saying that libertarians aren't you do you and I'll do me, and may the best man win. They do believe in justice systems and recompense and everything else. I mean, we haven't even talked about Mike's gold strategy yet. So I don't want to belabor it, but it sounds like you want to go back to the gold standard.
I wouldn't go all the way back to the gold standard. I do believe that we need to replace the Federal Reserve System and its discretionary monetary policy with a rules-based system. Now, we can all fight about what that rules-based system should look like. I'm a big advocate of Milton Friedman's idea, which is to...
Uncle Milty right back there.
There he is. My dad made me read Milton Friedman when I was as young as 17 and 18 years old. He made me read a lot of other stuff that wasn't as useful, by the way, but he got this one right.
Hey, I read my kids Douglas Adams for bedtime stories. So,
good for you.
And with a nod to old Doug, anytime I meet anyone who dates or employs any of my children, I say, I apologize for the inconvenience. But in any event,
terrific. They're better off for it.
But with the gold, because a lot of people say, well, Nixon took us off the gold standard. I said Nixon was in a box because at that point, 8 years into our great society, we had run out of money.
Well, we had, and the fixed rate scenario that had been created at that point was not sustainable. I would go with Friedman's idea of allowing the monetary base, money supply, to increase by only a fixed percent per year that would be unchangeable. That percentage should be set at approximately what you would expect real GDP growth to be, say 2% or 3%.
Because we've had balanced budget. Virginia Congressman Bob Goodlatte, before he left, and his successor Ben Klein has shepherded it as well, as a balanced budget amendment that ties any budget growth to GDP.
Yes.
So because everyone says, oh, a balanced budget amendment just means we'll just raise taxes, because a lot of states do that. They, oh, we had to raise taxes because we have...
But you've got to cap spending at some point.
Right, and that's what this does, is it says your spending can only go up as much as GDP.
Which I think is brilliant.
Yeah.
You and I are lucky to be in the Commonwealth of Virginia as much as it drives us.
You're a Virginia guy, too.
I live about 2.5 hours east of Charlottesville, in the northern neck of Virginia.
In the wilds.
In the wilds.
That's right.
Yeah, we are out in the middle of nowhere. So anyway, to your point, there are things that we can do about monetary policy to make it work better, and fiscal policy, because you are right, the federal government of the United States is spending money in an unsustainable way.
So last question, and I know there's a wide field, and I think there was something about 200 or so candidates 4 years ago for the Libertarian Party nomination. I think somebody put my name in. I'm not even sure. I didn't do it.
I voted for him.
Robert F. Kennedy, keynote speaker at Freedom Fest. A lot of people, were shocked, and personally, I waggle my finger at my brothers and sisters in the media that didn't raise an eyebrow when Robert F. Kennedy told CNN that if he didn't win the nomination, he wasn't going to support the winner because you tore Donald Trump a new one when he said that. And he didn't even say it as unequivocally as that. Bobby Kennedy.
That's right. He just demurred from it, but
Yeah,
Bobby Kennedy Jr. said it outright.
Yeah, he said, why would I do that?
Right.
So the question then becomes, Robert F. Kennedy says, you know what? The Libertarians need a standard bearer.
And I'm in.
And you're in. So
and
you're going to seek.
So he'll be
Robert F.
happy about that.
You'll be endorsed by Robert F. Kennedy. You'll seek his endorsement.
Well, I would seek his endorsement. I don't know it'll be forthcoming. Robert Kennedy Jr. is a guy who gets a few things right, and so I don't mean to run him down completely behind his back.
Well, no, Republicans say the same thing about him, so he gets a few things right.
He does get a few things
Democrats don't say that about him at all. They say
but
he's not a nutcluster.
He is not a libertarian.
Okay.
He is a guy who believes that the state needs to work better.
Yeah.
He is a good government type of guy, not a shrink government kind of guy. And, so it's a little bit different there.
Our hometown and your home state, Madison, and really more George Mason, said humans are flawed.
Yeah.
And
he got that right.
And yeah, in spades.
Except for you and me, he got that right.
But they're flawed. No. Believe me, my wife is sitting right over there. She can fill the rest of the segment. But by restricting the scope of what government does, it restricted the corruption that men could bring to their office.
Exactly.
Is that something that you would want to bring back in, is shrink that government down and shrink, not even in numbers, just the authority of these offices financially?
Absolutely. We're a big believer in decentralizing power away from the federal government back to the states. One of the elements of what we call the Gold New Deal, we believe that we need a brand new relationship between us and the federal government, as well as between states and the federal government. We believe that we need a constitutional amendment that is very much 10th Amendment-like to give states the ability to opt out of federal supremacy, to unilaterally settle disputes between state law and federal law in state court, by the way. People have said, why don't we just pass the 10th Amendment over again and say this time we mean it?
This time we mean it.
That's not a bad strategy, but I'm not sure.
Don't make me turn this country around. Well,
right.
But the radio broadcast is the second most ardent broadcast supporter of the Convention of States, and that's only because Mark Levin is on way more stations than I am.
I understand.
But I don't think he gives the airtime to the Convention of States project that I do.
Yeah. I look forward to being there with you.
Oh, awesome. I was going to ask, but then you jumped ahead, because that to me, as everyone wants, and I had somebody do it. When I brought it up, they said, oh, you're one of them insurrectionists. I said, explain to me how an insurrectionist can be applying something that's actually in the Constitution.
Right.
What?
To advancing the idea of developing our democracy, our pluralistic democracy, in a way that'll be more sustainable in the future.
Right, and well, that's then he may be my first presidential endorsee. Mike Termont.
Now it is a big risk, a convention. Things can go sideways on you, and there are those who say that you and I need to be careful about what might happen there.
But here's my answer to that. And it struck me, I think I fell in the shower, and instead of inventing the flux capacitor, it struck me. The convention that gave us the U.S. Constitution, fairly stated, was not convened to write the U.S. Constitution. It was designed to fix, and so when...
Something that existed already.
Right, so when people say runaway convention, they're talking in reference to the U.S. Constitution.
It happened once already.
But the Article 5 specifically lays out the rules of order within it. See, the U.S. Constitutional Convention was not convened under Article 5 of a constitution that hadn't existed yet.
Right.
So that's where the difference is if you read Article 5, it very specifically lays out the limitations on a state's convention to amend the Constitution.
Right, so it can't run away completely.
And it can't change, amendments that were already there.
That's right.
And so I think that there is a lot of firewall that people are conveniently, let's just say conveniently, leaving out of the argument.
I appreciate that, and I think you're right about that. The other thing that I always say to those who warn us against the possibility of it running away, and not maybe complete running away, but going sideways on us and us getting some amendments that we wouldn't like, one of the things that I always share with people is, I don't like the way things are going now. The time has come to take a little bit of a risk.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's what Jefferson warned in the Declaration of Independence, where he basically said, listen, it's completely understandable that as the water just slowly gets hotter, the frog doesn't realize
That's
it's
right.
boiling. I'm colloquializing what Jefferson said.
But the water is damned hot now, to your point.
Here's a tougher question, and I say this to a lot of folks. I mean, we'll get 7 people running for the same congressional nomination. We'll get 5 people running for the same Senate nomination.
Sure.
And yet we're seeing moms coming out of the woodwork. We have, don't tell anyone, Antonin Scalia's daughter is running for the Albemarle County School Board. I'm telling you. But there's great defenders of liberty running for school board.
Yeah.
We need to transmit that into the boards of supervisors,
Agreed.
the General Assembly,
Yep.
and those places.
Yep.
Does Mike Dermott, whether he becomes the Libertarian Party nominee or not for president,
Right.
Lord only knows that would be, the day if the Libertarian wins. Although I made the argument, if you look at the policy, Donald Trump may have been the first Libertarian president. When you look at some of the prison reforms, I mean, he's
He
the first
did
one.
have some angles on libertarianism. I'll give you that. He's a bit of a populist and not a
Sure.
pro-trade, free trade kind of guy.
A populist libertarian would be an interesting, maybe that's who Afro Man is. I don't know.
Maybe that's who Afro Man is.
But my point being is we've got 140 General Assembly seats
Yep.
in a Dillon Rule state where,
Yep.
God bless, a libertarian gets in there and starts kicking tables over.
Which would be great.
And so please promise me that if what generally happens to a libertarian running for president happens, stay involved, because I like your ideas on gold.
appreciate
like
that.
your ideas on law enforcement. But please stay involved so that
I promise to stay involved. One of the things that I think that somebody like me can do with the Libertarian Party, and what I always encourage presidential candidates to do, is to raise awareness of the Libertarian Party brand and libertarianism more generally with a lowercase l, so that the local candidates can get more traction and get more involved and be recognized for what libertarian really is all about, which is a philosophy that is, as you point out, correctly identified with the development of the Constitution in the first place.
I mean, just because Jefferson started the Democratic and Republican parties, basically, doesn't mean he really started it because he was watching. I mean, if you look at why he founded the Democratic Republican Party, they won. He was responding to the Alien and Sedition Acts. He was, un-American activities,
Right.
legislation. He said, whoa, whoa, whoa.
He was quite a libertarian at heart, and I
Yeah.
believe that if he had seen the development of those parties over time, he would have founded the Libertarian Party before 1972.
Well, God bless you. Mike Dermott, what's your website for people to visit?
MikeTermott.com. The trick there would be to spell it right. You can get the
yeah.
M-I-K-E part easily enough. It's MikeTermat.com.
Thank you, sir, and you have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you. You too. Go Virginia.
And we'll be right back with more coverage from Freedom Fest in just a little bit. Welcome back to the Freedom Fest specials from the Afternoon Constitutional, and Joe Thomas in the morning, coming to you from Memphis, Tennessee, which if you follow me on Facebook, you've seen my video, which is called Dispatches from Charlottesville's Future, where we have about 5 or 6 dozen homeless people sleeping every night in front of the Federal Reserve Bank. And I'm not kidding. Go check it out on Facebook at Seville Joe Thomas. Man sitting next to me here on the video is the Ed in Ed Choice. No, he is Robert Enlow. He is president, director, boss.
President, CEO, yeah, that works.
Of the Ed Choice, and Ed Choice, it's, now I'm forgetting the website address. I've put away all my...
Edchoice.org.
See, I was convinced that it wasn't that simple, and that is such a failing of mine that I always believe that it's not that simple.
It happens. It happens.
And that's their T-shirt back there. You can order those Milton Friedman, Uncle Milton T-shirts there. Robert, I'm in such a fascinating place because for years we've been talking to you. We've been trying to get school choice going. We flattened our foreheads over the stupid scholarship program in Virginia. I was terrified because after that scholarship program was enacted, what I was warned about seemed to be coming through fruition, which was politicians said, what about school choice? We did school choice. We don't need to do more school choice. When it really wasn't school choice. But that being said, The state of the movement, ever since The Gift That Keeps on Giving, Terry McAuliffe was goaded into squeezing out a little of the truth of what the left's agenda is towards parents. Where are we now nationwide? And help me get Virginia right.
I'd love to. So a movement that was started because of McCullough's comments and, of course, the pandemic and years of work, but a movement that was started by it has well surpassed Virginia. As of today, there are 9 states, 7 of them this year, that have passed universal choice. That means every single child in the state can go. That's Utah. That is Indiana, that is Ohio, that is Florida, that is Arizona, that is West Virginia, that is Arkansas, and that is Iowa. And it's amazing. Every single child in that state can choose a public, private, or charter school now. Virginia still seems to be lagging behind.
Well, and it's a Baptist and bootleggers coalition of some Republicans who didn't want to lose it as a campaign issue, as if there was nothing else to campaign on the fact that you did school choice. You know, why don't you take a victory lap? But they didn't want to do it.
Well, and it's wildly popular among families. All families want school choice, regardless whether you're rich, poor, black, white, brown, yellow, wherever you're from in the country or in the state, they all want school choice, right? And so it's unbelievable they can't get it passed.
And since we're talking about podium jockey elected officials, each county, Glenn Youngkin surpassed previous Republican performances by between 5 and 10%, which means that's people who didn't vote for a Republican before, but because he was talking about parents' rights and it said school choice 4 times in his victory speech.
Yep.
I never thought I'd hear a governor of a Commonwealth of Virginia say it once ever. He said it 4 times on election night. So we failed to get it to his desk the first time. Talk about what we have to do. All seats in the General Assembly are up for election starting September 22nd.
Well, so as you know, EdChoice is a nonpartisan organization,
Right,
so we
right.
don't believe in voting for candidates. But I will say the following. I will
Just
say
to
the
prove
following.
to you that my heart was broken on primary day.
Oh, yeah.
When one of the most ardent supporters of school choice in Virginia, a Democrat named Chap Peterson, lost his primary because he voted for something Glenn Youngkin wanted.
Yeah, so this is a real challenge for you guys in the state of Virginia, right? So let's talk. First of all, you have these elections of governors, and they only have 4-year terms. That's always a little bit of a challenge for you guys. But what you need to recognize in the state of Virginia is that if you keep toying around the edges and keep the scholarship program going, that's fine, but it serves kids, but it doesn't really change the system, they're going to continue to have control and power over that system every step along the way. And that means until you get also public school choice, true public school choice where districts don't matter. I mean, it's one thing to say you have choice, but if you don't allow a child to go from one district to another free of charge, that's a problem, right? And so I think this is an argument you can start making from a much better parent perspective rather than a school perspective. And I think one of the advocates' problems in states is they say, oh, this is school choice. It's not. It's educational choice. It's parent freedom.
Yeah.
And that's what the focus should be on in Virginia.
And the parents' movement is such, and I think it terrifies the traditional legacy political parties because they can't hurt it. They don't want to lose it, but they don't know what to do with it.
And they don't know what to do with it. And look, school choice, let's be clear about this. The idea of educational freedom, the idea of parent freedom, people are saying, oh, it's a red state issue now, right? Well, that's true to a certain degree, but it's also a red states that killed it this year. Virginia, Idaho, Georgia, right?
Yep.
Texas is possibly going to kill it. So this concept that that only happens in red states is true on its face, but not necessarily true. And so what I think is going to happen here is as parents start to continue to wake up and make choices, I can tell you this much. We know from our polling and what we're seeing on the ground, there is no one under the age of 25 or 30 who will put up with not having options.
There's your answer. I mean, that's it. Robert Enlow is with us. He's the CEO of EdChoice.com, educational freedom, Milton Friedman's brainchild. And, you know, I'm sad as we rapidly lose his first love, which was a free market capitalist society. At least we'll get this. You know?
Well, his argument is if you want to see where a market's going to go, look at the education of the children, right? So so the more we get children educated in a more free market, parent choice-based environment, the better it's going to be for our society.
So help us frame the narrative. I think you started there just a moment ago.
Yeah.
It's not school choice, it's parents' choice.
It's parent freedom. It's parent educational freedom. It's educational options. I don't really care where a child goes to school.
No.
Or where they learn. In fact, they can learn at home. The idea is that the money should follow the families to whatever options. It's like saying, hey, Lay's potato chips can only do baked Lay's. Or one other type, right? So you can't.
Yeah.
You have to allow the ability.
Or,
of company,
if you live in this zip code, you can
only-
only get baked Lays.
innovation doesn't happen when you control it the way we're trying to control education. So you have to allow for true innovation. Now, microschooling and pods and homeschooling are making that happen. And Virginia has a lot of that going on, and you should be
Yes, we do.
honoring and magnifying that.
And it's almost in spite of the system.
It's absolutely in spite of the system. In fact, you know when you're having a market's getting ready to come is when you have an underground marketplace.
Yeah.
And that's what you have in this country right now.
And we see it in so many places, and this is why coming to Freedom Fest has always been important for me. People look at you and go, you one of them conservatives? Because, and I'm really, I blanch at that word because I don't want to conserve where we are.
Yep.
I want to restore what we were. And so maybe restorative is a better word because I look at farming. We just had the Rogue Farm conference at Joel Salatin, who's been here at Freedom Fest before, has been a keynote speaker, holds all these organizations that come up with ways to get around the FDA and the USDA to help sell food to people. You know, oh, you don't want to buy that food from the farmer. You better go to the grocery store. But that's their premise. That's their premise. Bless them for it. And we see it in the teachers and the co-ops that come up and they work within a church, so then they can kind of get outside of, and it's brilliant.
Yeah.
And you know, it is. It's like Glasnost. Remember when Gorbachev tried to I'm going to reform just a little bit, and it blew up.
Yep. So I think the framing, it's a great question. The framing of this cannot be oppositional anymore. It can't be teachers against parents. It can't be private against public, charter against private. It has to be everyone. So you know who really wants more educational freedom and options? Teachers.
That's what
They want to start schools. They want to start ideas. They want a freedom from the bureaucracy. They know that the system that basically looks the same as it did in 1635 should change, right?
Wow.
And so, look, teachers, so when you look at frame this as, I want parents to be free to do whatever they want. I want teachers to be free to do whatever they want.
Where is the teacher's version of Alexander Solzhenitsyn,
right.
who's gonna write that dispatch from within the gulag of teachers?
Well, you're seeing it already, right? You're seeing teachers in traditional schools being very disheartened with their profession, very downtrodden. But you're seeing teachers who are doing pods and micro schools and private schools and charter schools significantly happier, significantly more engaged, and
significantly more well paid.
and oftentimes more well paid. But what is also really cool about it is you're looking to the point where teachers are now starting these cool micro schools and these learning pods, and parents are taking them up on it. And so you have this opportunity finally of potentially a free exchange of education between education providers, teachers, and education consumers, parents. That's what we need. We don't need a middleman anymore.
Yeah, no, and if there's anything with medical freedom, what have we discovered in medical freedom? The cost of healthcare driven up by the middleman, cost of education, and is it too wonky? Is it too nerdy? Robert Enlow knows these numbers. To talk about the cost per grade point, but Claire Booth-Luce Policy Institute did a great survey in Virginia. Charlottesville City Schools, second to the worst for dollars spent versus grades achieved. We watched the national average. We're down in the mid 30s, and those were a high water scores. That were closer to 40 in like math. And we spend more and more and more, and we get less and less and less. Is it too nerdy to make that point?
No, in fact, here's a. Let me add to that point for the nerdy piece. From 1950 to 2015, we saw a 100% increase in student enrollment in America, a 253% increase in teachers, which I can be okay with, and a 709% increase in non-teachers. So if you want to talk about where money's going, you know where it's going, right? And then if you look at actually a classroom, this is my other thought experiment, take a classroom of 30 kids, times that by the average that they make, right? So it's about $12,000.
Haven't we done that on this program?
It's crazy, right? All of a sudden you're realizing a teacher of the school building and the school room, you're still left over with like 200 grand. You're like, what's going on where'd that money go?
And the teacher has to buy her own toilet paper and crayons, and she has to live an hour drive away because she can't afford to live where the school is.
Yeah, and the idea of educational choice and educational freedom is really about teacher empowerment. It's about teacher freedom as much as it is about parent freedom.
Well, and then it becomes, I've hired the teacher I want,
Correct.
and the teacher knows the kids. And you talk about, and we run into so many kids, and I don't know if we're expanding what the spectrum means, but kids, even when I was in school, there were the troublemakers and there were the class clowns, and there were all, and who knows what they would be, classified as now. But I was in New York City public schools during the bankruptcy, so I was in 40 student classrooms. The teacher would just call security, get rid of the troublemakers, and then go on teaching the other ones. And it was hard. It was
Very
not
hard.
easy to get the information. You were really told that the student had to go pull the information out.
Yeah.
It wasn't going to just be handed to them by
Look,
the teacher.
we've got to come up with a way to educate kids and educate our families in a way that's consistent with the goodness gracious, the 20th century, not even the 21st,
My
right?
God, yeah.
So we got to figure out a way to do
And
this.
shouldn't it be easier now than ever before?
Should be a lot easier. But the problem is once you make it have to go into a building, once you make the building and the union and the district the center of it all, it's a problem. Now look, there's going to be a lot of families who want to go to school 5 days a week, but you know how many don't? Over half.
Really?
Our polling is
my
showing
gosh.
now that over half of the families would be okay with their child being at home 1 day a week. About 40% are okay educated at home 2 days a week. So until you figure this customization and hybridization out, you're going to have a problem, because it used to be maybe 20% of the country was like that. Now it's 50% of the country.
Well, and even the workforce is so different than it
Correct.
used to be. So saying a kid is in school Monday through Friday, 9 to 3,
Yep.
is not where the families are. Maybe
Correct.
it's easier for the kid to be home on Tuesdays and Thursdays because their parents work in restaurants.
That's correct. Or their parents are at home more, because, I mean,
Right.
I don't know about you, but my staff only come in the office 2 to 3 days a week. So, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that have
You're a
that
heck
kind
of a
structure.
boss. You hiring?
Well, we call it remote work. It's still work. Let's be clear about it. It's still work. They just do it remotely.
Right. Okay. All right. That's I do that too. So, Robert, all those states leading the way, we still have the Federal Department of Education. We still have the National Federation of Teachers holding these teachers hostage. Are we going to see in the next year or two more whistleblowers from within, more dispatches from the gulag saying, get me out, more teachers breaking free from it?
I think TikTok has made it a reality. So whether you like it or not, I think you're going to see a lot more of these kind of things coming out of schools, and watching teachers in schools, and watching educators, and watching principals and stuff like that. And you're going to have families figuring out how to customize. That's just going to be what's going to happen.
Now I'm afraid that as soon as it happens, they're going to say, "Oh, that's just Soviet disinformation.
Well-
That's right. That's Vladimir Putin sending you, fake videos." And
I look, I'm not going to comment on that, because I
Oh,
don't
no,
know,
no,
but it
I
might be.
understand,
But
I
the answer
understand.
is, look, information flies so fast right now,
Yeah.
right? And not only just information, visual information and contextual information. And so, look,
well, we went through it here in Charlottesville. So
Yep.
that video that got out of my children's elementary
Yeah.
school, that was
Yeah.
that was where I lived. That was their elementary school.
Wow.
And you know what this? Did you ever hear what the school administration's answer to that was?
no.
You'll love this one. You might want to sit down. Their answer was, "Well, we're really disappointed that you saw it."
Yeah, because it's disappointing to see freedom.
But
yeah.
that was their answer. Their answer wasn't that we were disappointed that this
It happened.
or somebody made a bad choice or anything like. Even the typical,
Yep.
this was a rogue teacher, we've already fired them, make
Yeah.
them a fall guy. They said you shouldn't have seen it. Again, tone deaf as Terry McAuliffe
That's
is.
right. That's right. And I think parents have now gotten onto that. So look, one of the silver linings of the pandemic, obviously choice had been going and growing and growing and growing
Yeah.
for years
Well,
before
how many
that.
years now? Just
So Milton started our organization 26 years ago.
Okay, so-
And when we started, there were 4 programs operating in 4 states with less than 6,000 kids. Today, there are 78 programs in 32 states in D.C., serving almost 1 million kids. So we've grown a lot.
You're
over
not
the
an
course-
overnight
We're not an overnight success. Now, the pandemic has helped us move a lot faster. We've reached the tipping point, right, in many ways. And I think what parents now have is a common cultural experience. So before the pandemic, parents' common cultural experience is we went to school. Remember when you went to school?
Yeah.
I got up, went to school every day, 9 to 5, or not even that, probably
Got picked on,
seven
yeah.
to, got picked on, right?
That's right.
And our parents did that, and their parents did it. So that was the common cultural understanding. Pandemic changed that, because overnight everyone became an educator, and they saw what was happening. And they're like, well, what's going on here? And a lot of them said, I think I can do something different. And that's what's happening.
Well, and you saw it with your kids too, because your kids reacted,
Oh, yeah.
and you could actually sit with them, and if they said, "I don't understand this,"
That's right.
you weren't waiting 3 months for the next parent-teacher
right.
conference to find out your kid didn't understand
right.
something. It was real time.
And some kids thrived in that, and some kids didn't thrive. And that's the whole point of having a diverse market experience for education, not one size fits all. And so I'm hoping what the pandemic will ultimately teach us and finally teach us is we can actually create a system of learning opportunities that doesn't have to be based on one building.
Robert Enlow, obviously we don't look to Washington for these answers.
I try not to.
That's why you smile when you get up in the morning. You understand that it happens at home. But when you look at, we just watched more testimony in Washington about the FBI's list of parents who are, quote, threatening school board members. Yeah, and by threatening, they're threatening to vote them out of office.
Yeah.
What a terrible threat. You know, how is there a danger that Washington and Richmond and abstract will go harder? This is the last question. I'll let you go.
No, I want to think about this question. It's a good question. So look, first of all, obviously we would oppose any kind of violence. Obviously, you and I would, right?
But
let's be clear about this.
When they claim violence
Yeah.
is saying, "I'm going to start a petition to get you thrown out of office," well, that's not violence.
So when the government uses and abuses its power to thwart the individual liberty, choice, and voice of individual families and parents, that should be stopped. That's tyranny. And that is the lifeblood of tyranny, is to stop free speech.
Well, because I wax hyperbolic.
So I don't believe in stopping tyranny. Stopping liberty in any way. So if you're going to have a Washington D.C. try to stop free choice and free voice, that's tyrannical, and we should oppose that.
And I said this expose on the FBI was sort of perhaps the parental rights Lexington and Concord.
Possible.
Yeah, because
we'll see,
there's,
because it's like these folks. People are tired of being lied to, and they're going to these school board meetings, and I think for
And they're
years,
running for school
and they're running
boards.
for. Remember, for years, only 6% of the families would actually vote in school board meetings, elections. I think that's going to change, and it's going to change the way these things look.
Just dirty little secret, Albemarle County, our home base, one of our school board candidates is Aunt Nan Scalia's daughter.
Oh, wow!
So
Pretty cool.
there's reinforcements on the ride.
Well, I'm guessing the brain power heft will be strong
yes.
with
I'm
that
saying,
one. Right?
you ain't seen nothing yet. And it's funny because she doesn't play it up. She's married, but the Democrats, every flyer they put out, Scalia, because they're trying to scare people with But I mean, this is the heft of it.
Yeah.
This is what we need on school
That's right.
boards to empower the parents.
That's right.
As well,
That's
so
right.
to defend them. Robert Enlow, he is with EdChoice. He's the boss. He's the man who he printed the T-shirts. I want this T-shirt.
This is the other T-shirt. Here, let
Stand
me
up
stand
and let
up
him
and show
see.
you this one. This is the one I like. Oh, let me get
come in shot here.
There's the one I like.
That's it. That's
a special
it.
T-shirt
That's
that I
it.
made
That's
for us. Right, so.
Thank you
Appreciate
so much,
you,
sir.
Thanks
I
for
really
having me.
appreciate it.
Appreciate
Enjoy
you.
the rest of Freedom Fest. And thank you for tuning in for all of this coverage. Until we're back in Charlottesville for you. So long. I will do this one. So long, and thanks for all the fish.